really want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here with us. We've already, I mean, in the past 15 minutes, I would say we've had some insightful conversations already that Scott and I are going to take back to the Academy think tank and ensure that we are doing our best to get our players ready for employment. Obviously, in pro sports, this is something that can happen at any point, and I think the most fortunate of our members get to choose when they walk away, but that's not necessarily always the case. And so, taking our best shot to ensure that we're providing opportunities that are unique to our members, so that if they are thrust into the position that you want to go and pursue something else, that you're set up to do that as well as you were set up to play football. So on that, maybe I'll just throw it over to my co-manager of the Academy, Scott. If you don't mind just doing a quick intro of some of the panelists, we can go back and forth, but I'll defer to you first.
You're giving me the light lifting. Hi, guys. I'm with Jason out of the PA office, and we run the Academy together. Up in the top left corner of my screen, we've got Moton Hopkins, Moton alumni, all-time Red Black. We voted last year, decade Red Black there, Mo?
Yes, sir. Yeah, all decades in. Yep.
Yeah, and he's with Lockheed Martin in HR down in Texas, and has been there for quite some time. So he joins us. We've got Jacquilynne Ellison from Hub International, who is she's the director of talent acquisition for Canada, and she has been so open and giving to members who've been seeking employment at Hub, and she has had many conversations, which has just been fantastic. We have Maggie Ortmeyer. Maggie is from Sportified. She's a co-founder of Sportified. She's been in the recruitment business of athletes finding their next step after the field for 10 years. And just like Jacquilynne, Maggie has been fantastic at forwarding those job opportunities. So if you saw the Chicago posting a couple days ago, the one that so many of you responded to, that is because of Maggie. And James from Wuxley, outdoor wear. James is an alumni as well. And James, it's our first time meeting, so thank you so much for doing that. Jason, if I've missed something, please let me know.
You did a great job. I'll just always be a little bit CFL biased, and I'll throw a couple more accolades out there. But we've got two Grey Cup champions on the call in James and Mo. So I think that was worthwhile just throwing into those pieces, not to discredit anything that Jacquilynne and Maggie bring to the table, but I think for our members that they walked in your shoes, or at least they ran in your shoes, and now they're preparing to hopefully get you ready for those uncomfortable ones that come after the cleats, maybe as uncomfortable. But yeah, from a standpoint of how we're going to run this for everybody that's joining as attendees, we've got a few pre-planned questions in two kind of different segments. And then after that, we welcome you all to kind of put your hands up and ask some questions directly to the group, because I know that you've got a wealth of experience to draw on this. So if I can, and Scott, jump in if there's any more housekeeping that you'd want, but I'm ready to jump into questions.
Yeah, so let's just say for the guys, if you have a chance, you're all more handsome than I am. So if you want to come on camera, please, there we go. Thanks, Brandon, for that. I appreciate that. And at the chat box at the bottom, if you've got questions, you can either raise your hand at any point or put it in the chat box, and we'll watch what's going on. Okay, so back to you, Sir Jason.
Thank you very much. So for our esteemed group of panelists, the first question, and this is really kind of drawing on the player perspective, we want to start with something that you guys maybe live and breathe a little bit more than the hard-hitting industry questions. So the question to the group, and maybe I'll ask for Mo or James to start, and then we can go to the rest, is how do you approach an interview preparation during your transition away from sport? At that point you made that decision, or it was made for you. How did you, or how do you do that in an effective way? Maybe Mo to start.
Yep. So the approach I took was mostly research and practice. I wanted to make sure whenever I got in the interview, I was able to speak the language and really translate what I did or what we do, right, in the way that it's going to resonate with the interviewer. One thing that I experienced or many times is playing didn't resonate with a lot of people that didn't understand sports or respect it, right? So being able to articulate it in a way that it translates to their industry or the role that I'm going to do or what they're looking for was really one of my preps after first couple bad interviews where it just didn't really sit right. They're like, okay, so what's next? So that was probably one of the biggest keys for prep for me.
Yeah, please go ahead, James.
Yeah, no, just drafting off that. I think, research is so important. That's like our new game tape or new playbook that you really gotta look at. Make sure you're comfortable. We're athletes. We get comfortable by exercising, so maybe consider getting out there and getting a workout and build your confidence right before you get into the interviews. One way to look at it. Be natural, be yourself. Um, you know, all while I don't interview so much myself, I do interview people and athletes, and there's always a connection. And so when I get in an interview, of course we're going to be doing a lot of talking, but it's also listening too, and finding those cues, that find a way to connect with the person that you're with. And athletics is always a great and universal connection, I find.
I think the full panel here would agree in some way, shape, or form. But to Jacquilynne and Maggie, and you have both worked with our members specifically, and so maybe that lived experience, but athletes in general. How would you say, just broadly transitioning away from sport, what's something to consider as you prepare for an interview? Maybe I'll put Maggie first on this one, if that's okay. Sorry, I think you're just on mute.
Sorry, guy. I saying I just think there's so many things to consider when going into an interview. That's sort of a loaded question, but I think you really have to hone in on your strengths. I mean, if you are an effective communicator, you need to shine and you need to be that effective communicator. If you aren't, I guess work on the skills that will help you improve, because ultimately that's all an interview is. Like, I just had a candidate go on an interview. He's at final round, so he was flying out and he was pretty nervous. It was his first time interviewing. He's an MLS veteran. He's worked the same job for 5 years that he just casually rolled into after soccer. And he's like, Maggie, this is my first interview. And I said, it hit him that he had never formally interviewed for a job. And I said, can you talk? Are you confident? Do you feel good about going into this? Like, have you educated yourself? And he's like, yeah, I mean, it was clear he was going to do fine, but in his head, he wasn't sure. But the reality I think there are so many ways to prepare, and it really depends what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And you have to be open and candid with yourself about what those strengths and weaknesses are, and then shine or work on them accordingly. But easier said than done, I understand. But I think at the end of the day, transitioning to an interview or going into an interview is just all about readiness. And, like you said, James, too, I tell guys all the time, I'm like, do whatever you did, do your pregame routine, whatever that looked like, right? Listen to those same songs, get some push-ups in, get a quick workout in, whatever you did to get like the blood flowing before a game. Treat this as a game, right? Treat this as another, big opportunity to perform, to shine, to win, ultimately. So long answer, I guess, but not super direct, but that's just some random thoughts.
I love that. And I just add a couple other little things that I think everyone's hit on, but I think it's also, it's first impressions. So understanding that it might look and feel a little bit formal, especially if it's an interview than you're used to. So making sure that you're doing that research, that prep ahead of time, and that you have a true understanding of what it is that you're really looking for. I think that has to be conveyed when you're meeting with that potential employer, because they're going to start to look at it's sort of understanding like what's the needs of this employer and how do I adapt to that? I don't think that there's lots of that sort of self-awareness. So just really making sure that you're prepared to understand, okay, I'm meeting with this employer. This is the impression I want to have, and I want to make sure that I'm prepared to not only self-promote myself, but what is it that the employer is ultimately looking for, and to try to adapt as much as possible. Because of course, as a player, you're very adaptable to different things that are coming up in the game. How do you bring that to an interview and know that they may throw those questions at you, that you need to be prepared? What's your timeline? When can you start? An employer is going to have usually an immediate need that they need to fill. So how are you able to convey where you're at with your journey to ensure that, again, you're being open and transparent throughout that process so that again, it's a symbiotic relationship as you're going through those next stages in that interview process, because it's not always just a chat. It could be that an employer, it's a formal interview and they're looking at you for a role. So knowing that ahead of time, asking your interviewer any of those questions around how to prepare, like don't be worried to ask, like, what should I prepare? Are we going, like, what, setting that stage so that you're really aware? Because I've had, individuals will come in and they'll be like super casual, like they'll be in like they just got off a workout, which is fine, but maybe that's more of a formal interview and it's virtual and you do need to dress up or you do need to present a different way. So just sort of setting that stage, preparing, understanding again, what's the intention of that interview, and then how can you adapt to meet what that employer might be looking for at that time.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, Scott, I saw you come up. I'm going to let him ask the next question, but I think you've probably answered several of our next questions in all of those, which is indicative of a very strong panel already. So thank you very much for your response.
And just a reminder to the guys on here, like if you have a question during any of these questions, write it in the chat. Just put your hand up or say, hey, I want to ask something. So I think that'd be a great thing. Next question is something that Jason and I, it's amazed how many guys, when they go to transition, are wondering about their value in the workplace. They know their value as an athlete, but in the workplace, they don't see the direct translation of what you've learned on the field to HR, to sales, or whatever area you're going to. So James, if you want to start that, and Mo, and then Jacquilynne and Maggie, I want to hear what you've seen from guys who've presented really well and ones who've missed the mark. Go ahead, James. You're on mute there. I know you're.
Okay, sorry. I think there's a lot of different values you can bring from what we get from football. Like the first one, HR. Well, guess what? I didn't realize it until after, but when you play on a football team, you're basically in a human laboratory of all different types of personalities, alpha personalities, and you know how it is. You got to navigate, weave, and deal with different kind of characters, people, situations, and so that's a strength that I think we really take away from as football players. Sales, for sure. As a football player, like I think we learned so many sales skills along the way. We're always trying to motivate each other in different ways. We're putting in different opportunities, whether it's speaking to our peers, speaking in front of the team. I think one of the best skills that I learned during the football days was just all the public appearances that we get to do, speaking in front of schools. It was awesome. I got to practice in front of 8-year-olds and make all the mistakes in the world, and no one really noticed. But you often get to learn along the way people's reaction, and so I thought HR, sales cover too, but like it goes all the way, operations, but maybe I'll send it over to Mo in case anything he can relate to on that.
Yeah, and I completely agree, James. I mean, one of the things that when I think about this question, nobody talks about the psychological aspect of transitioning and like that identity crisis you have. And everybody goes through it in the transition. We all have it in different phases, right? Like we all felt in high school, it's like, all right, am I going to get a scholarship? Am I going to be done, right? Then in college, am I going to be able to play pro? Am I going to the league? Am I going to be able to, and then now when you're done, and this is really it. And I vividly remember the conversation with my agent. He was like, you can't just go pick up football. Like once it's it, that's it, right? So it's a different level of, I think, attachment to the game. And then that comes with that, okay, can I do it in the next phase of life? I think that's the part that you have to get comfortable with, because everyone feels that way. Everyone has that sense of doubt. But the things that we bring to the table that I've seen that lack in the workforce are, to James's point, being able to work in teams, being able to pivot and transition during ambiguity or changing priorities, which is a constant. Those are things that I highlighted a lot, because a lot of people in the workforce, a lot of people that weren't athletes, aren't familiar with the space. They cannot do that. They crumble under a lot of pressure, and we're built for that. And so it's being able to, again, articulate in a way that matters to the role that you're applying for or interviewing for, or the industry. But just know we all have that strength and possess that talent that you just can't find, or you just can't, create in the workforce. And so that does, when you're able to articulate that in the right way, I think that does make us stand out in multiple industries, like James said, HR, sales. I mean, that's why I chose HR. It's team sport on a business side, but I mean, there really are some of the things that I think you should have confidence in going into an interview.
Yeah, we actually did some of this analysis when we were launching our CFL partnership at Hub, and we did an attribute sort of grid of all the different skills like critical thinking. And I know Mo and James already mentioned team, but there's so many synergies. That's why insurance is such a great fit, because it's so people centric, and then it's, you know, helping identify needs and problem solving. Like, you're doing all of that on the field. But I think if you can display that in an interview around that team spirit, and, you know, like I think Maggie was talking about somebody that, you know, didn't have, has never interviewed. Think about like behavioral interviewing, where they're asking you for tell me a time when. If you can translate the game in those behavioral interviews and those scenarios, that's going to be key. Because I think what's going to be really daunting for some people is they're going to ask, tell me a time when you took a complex problem and, you know, found a solution. You may go blank thinking, well, how am I going to answer this? I've just played football for the last 4 or 5 years. Think of those real life scenarios and use that to tell your story. Because we look at, you know, people that have a great attitude, again, team players, they want to be able to, you know, display those attributes, you know, in an organization. Plus, the other thing that don't forget to mention is your community the endorsement, and that being an ambassador in the community, because so many organizations have sort of that community responsibility. And if you've really honed in on, you know, the charitable aspect and, you know, mentorship with either young players or, you know, throughout your time as a football player, that's going to really resonate with employers. And that's really, I think, what's going to get you to that sort of next level too.
We work primarily on sales and biz dev driven roles. So for me, answering that question, how to show your value as a player, I look for all the qualities that resonate specifically with sales driven, revenue driving, I should say, roles. So I think the biggest thing to me, and honestly, having some experience working with non-athletes, not much, but this is why I work exclusively with athletes, because there's a lot of people who really don't want to work anymore. And it's pretty sad. And it's so uncommon to see that from an athletic background. If there's one thing that an athlete, especially one that has made it to the professional level, they have proved their ability to work and put in the work. And so few people want to put in work sometimes, sadly. So I think just the fact that they're workers, and, you know, being able to stress that, how you're resilient, you're gritty, you don't give up, you work hard. All of those things go really far just in the corporate world in general, but certainly in sales. Resilience is huge, right? You lose a game, you got a game the next day, you shake it off, you get a good night's sleep, eat a nice dinner, and you wake up and you do it again the next day. And you forget about the loss, and you just move forward and try to win. And I think that that's huge in sales. You know, you're going to lose deals. You're not going to get every cold outreach that you try to get. So resilience is huge. Work ethic, grit, competitive nature. You're naturally competitive. You want to win. So obviously that resonates a lot in sales. I just think, you know, those main qualities, there's so much value that an athlete has just by having those qualities that oftentimes guys don't even realize they have. You know, they play pro sports, they work hard, they can lose a game and win the next day. You know, it's all of those things that maybe seem so natural or organic or whatever to the athlete, but transfer so well into the corporate world too.
Appreciate the passion on that, Maggie. Just before we go to the next question, Joel, JB, or Brandon Hampton, you're getting an executive view of HR here. Are there any questions that are percolating in your brain now that while we've got them live that you'd like to ask?
Yeah. So when we're in the interviews, outside of like traditional work experience, what do you want to see? Like, where do you want to hear from us? Like, you know what I mean? That I guess can make us stand out. Because obviously, when we're in these positions, we don't have the traditional work experience. We're just playing football for our whole life. So, you know, in a lot of roles, like a lot of these guys are going to be applying for basic entry level. So, like once you get in, you're going to be taught the job. You're going to be taught the skills. So, what is it outside of that traditional work experience do you want to see in these interviews?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, you really touched on it. I think highlighting your ability to learn, right? When you talk about, hey, I'm going to go into the role and I'm going to be taught, I can train what to do, being coachable. I mean, being able to articulate again that you work well in teams, you can adjust, multitask, right? When you think about the things that we've done, your hands down on the line, you're getting a changing call right before the ball snap, you have to move two gaps, and we've done it in a different way. Again, I think that the thing that you have to do is practice, get with people so you can learn how to and find mentors, and I think people that have been in the role before, but find a way to articulate and translate that to where they'll understand it, right? They get the value. I think if people know sports, they'll innately know that, but being able to articulate that to them in a way that is their language is going to be the key thing. But I mean, it's really, hey, I'm willing to learn. I'm doing this transition. I'm all in. I've done it before. I have the skills there. It's just once you teach me how to do it, I can do it. And then I think again, coming in with prep and being able to say, hey, I know this is what's in this space. I've learned about this outside. I've gotten these certifications beforehand. Like I'm prepping for this entire time I've been playing, and this is what I want to do. I'm all in. I think being able to tell that story too is really important.
Yeah, I think what I'll add, because Mo mentioned so many great things. I think it's just your openness. Like if you show that you're open to different types of roles, I think Brandon, you mentioned that, they could be more entry level, and having good expectations going in and just being open. Don't, there sometimes people get focused, well, how much does this pay? And they'll ask all those questions out of the gates, which is fine. But there's a time and place sort of to like get there. So know that there could be, two or three different conversations. And you may explore that with multiple different people, but just keeping that openness. Because I think if people sort of ask right away, like, well, how much does this pay? And all of that, and they get really fixated on that, an employer is going to understand, try to figure out like, what's your long-term plan? Like, is this just temporary? Are you going back to continue to play? Are you retiring? Like some of those questions will be asked. So sort of understanding kind of where you're at, because the employer is going to want to understand, like, in this box, where do you fit? And I hate to be so direct with that, but Maggie and I were chatting about that. Some of these are full-time permanent roles. So sort of understanding, like, what's your plan? What are your goals? And conveying that. We want to understand sort of that like long-term plan too. And you may not know that automatically, but having some sense will help. And then I think being transparent, like kind of don't leave any of those cards off the table. Like if you plan to go home or you're going to go back, to a specific province or state, like be transparent, because that's where people are going to start to move you along that process and those next steps. And if you haven't been maybe as transparent or you don't know, have some of that prep in the beginning so that you're setting expectations so that they know going in what you're looking for. It's not necessarily all the skills and experiences you have, but it's also like, what's your plan? Like, where do you want to be? And then just be open and curious to those roles. Cause I think that's where it can get a little bit tricky if we don't know that out of those first conversations. So having an idea will help you too.
Thank you for those answers, and thank you for asking the question, Brandon. I think you pretty much are reading the playbook on my side here for how we get to the meat of these kinds of pieces. And so maybe this is kind of an opportunity to do more an experiential question for the panel, and I'll throw it to the full group here. But if you've seen it, if you maybe dreamt it up and it's one that you wish you used as a transitioning player, but what would be a good way, like a good example to turn an athletic experience into an interview answer? And again, maybe it's one that you've seen before, maybe it's one that landed you a job as you did that. So whoever wants to start on that one.
For me, I would say, in the locker room football, we have to navigate, or I'm gonna say navigate, but be around so many different personalities, conflict resolution within, I play defensive back. So within the secondary, within the team, things aren't going right week by week. We're losing, and You know, you have guys at locker room separated and being able to have to, you know, bring people together, whether that's, I don't know, after practice, going out to eat or going bowling, whatever it is, team bonding to just kind of reignite that chemistry. You know, I think that's a good way to bridge together, I guess, conflict resolution in the workplace. You know, I work right now. I just got a job in business development and logistics. So, you know, I do a lot of calling, talking with clients, talking with customers, and a lot of conflict resolution there. So being able to bridge that gap with, you know, football to how that can transfer over into the workplace would be a great way to do that. Because I know that's a question that often comes up in interviews. How do you deal with, you know, frustrated customers if you're in sales? Like, because obviously you're in sales, we're talking about the people. How do we deal with first year customers, and what are some ways you would take to deal with that solution? And you know, that could be one example you can use.
Yeah, there's a like I remember one question that I got a lot was how do you process information, or how do you like work through problem solving? And the one example that I used was talking about, you know, what we all do, right? Film study, applying it on the field, learning from mistakes, and implementing a new plan, right, and executing it, or even making mid-game adjustments, right? Like if I'm getting worked every time there's a twist stunt or whatever, and I'm not being able to drive, how do I adjust in the middle of it? And that translates directly to, you know, problem solving or whatever, you know, what happened in the business world. So that's another example. And then indirect leadership too. We're all, you know, leaders in some degree, but we're not hierarchical leader. Like none of our teammates report to us, if that makes sense, right? So we're leading from a peer standpoint. So being able to, we all have stories where we had to tell people to pick it up or find ways to check and adjust with our teammates. That's another great tool that I think all of us could utilize in the interview.
Nice. No, I think those are great to-dos. Maybe I'll share like a to-don't, because I recently had a CFL guy, and he was you know, he's with the company. He was telling me about, you know, he brought in somebody out in to get interviewed, and there just wasn't a humbleness. I'll say a lot across like any organization, like 50% of an organization, if you look at their core values, one of the core values is humble confidence, especially if you're in Canada, but you know, across organizations in the States too. And so the to-don't was, there wasn't that sense of humbleness when the person came to the interview. They actually wore their Grey Cup ring. They're kind of like scratching their head in the middle of the interview with the Grey Cup ring. Like, keep that thing at home and bring it out one day when there's a, you know, a suited party or something, but nothing to flash right off the gate. You know, it has its time and place, but you know, I think you know, if you come off humble, showing that you're open to learn and open to work, you know, there's just some stuff that we do as football players that is extremely valued these days. Like, there's a big challenge. You get people to come into work. You let them know, I came into work every day for the last, you know, 5 years or whatever it was. You didn't miss a day, and just showing up and working hard. And you know, you know, I meet with presidents and share information, but one of the trends that I'm seeing is will over skill, meaning, you know, we are people, and they might not have all the best skills for the workplace, but if you have the will, that's going to get your ranking in the workplace a lot higher. So really try to show that your will's there, and it certainly is if you certainly have some kind of will if you've made it pro in football.
Yeah, I really like what Brandon said about the critical thinking, and just remember that every interview has a theme. So if you can prep with those player questions where you can think of, you're most likely going to be asked a question around how you work with people. So usually it's a team. When you made a mistake, so what James is saying around that, you know, being humble and humility and being transparent. And then remember, these are going to be tell me the time when. So think about it. It's called a SAR method. It's the situation, action, and result. And so when someone's asking you these interview questions, they're going to want to know not just what the situation was, like, what did you do with that? How did you self-reflect on it? What was the action you took? What made this on a forward go plan to improve? So think about, that's what employers are going to be wanting, is a full comprehensive answer to that question. So just be mindful of your time, because sometimes we get going and we go like way on these tangents. So try to ground yourself. And if you just write SAR, like on a little Post-it, especially if you're in a virtual interview, no one can kind of see what's going on around you. Kind of have a little bit of that, where you have maybe like some good grounding techniques to kind of keep yourself focused. That will really help you. But talk about, again, team. What's the best leader you had? What's a mistake you made that you were able to self-reflect? And again, when did you go above and beyond? So when did you do something that wasn't asked? We always look for those in taking initiative. And then critical thinking, what Brandon said. So I think those are some great ways that you can really kind of showcase that, but have a little bit of that prep before. Think about those interview themes. They're going to be looking for all of those types of answers, and then draw on anything too from volunteering. Also draw on schools. A lot of our players are post-secondary educated. So draw on your time from school when you worked on a project, when you had to lean on other people. So it doesn't always have to just be on the field and as your career with your being a football player. Draw on different experiences. It could be volunteering, it could be school, it could be on the field, but have a few different examples and have those grounding techniques to just keep you focused in the interview. So you don't stay lean on too much of one question versus another.
That's some great feedback there. Jason, I was chatting to you in the chat about that. What do you think about going to the first question? Does that sound okay? Because I want to hear the answer to this one. This is the one I want
I think it's a perfect
get
springboard. So yeah, please launch for it.
Okay. To all the panelists and guys, this is the stuff. This is the secret sauce. What do you evaluate on a candidate within the first 5 to 10 minutes? What usually catches your attention to go, there's a chance, or equally, this is not going to work out because of. I'm really interested to see what's going on there. So whoever wants to pick that one up.
Let's start. No, do you want to, Jacquilynne?
Oh, I was just gonna say Mo kind of said it. I think it was James around.
I think we've all kind of said a little bit.
Scratching the head or coming in, and you're kind of like I said, it's the one thing is you've got a first impression, and anybody will tell you this is like if you walk into a store and someone's going to sell you something, you have a first impression within the first 5 seconds. So it is that. It's just how you present right out of the gate. So again, if somebody comes in and they're really I've had players where they're wearing a beautiful dress shirt and they're got a book and they're really attentive and they're on time and they're all of that to me is I'm yes, check. That, just those first impressions where they're going into it, you can tell that they're serious about the conversation and they've done that prep and they're really eager and engaged in the conversation. So I would say that to me is it's a first impression thing. How you're presenting kind of within those first 5 seconds is going to be key. Doesn't mean that it's the only thing we look at, but just knowing that if you're going to show up, especially if you've never interviewed with that interviewer before, you're not familiar with that company, you don't know what to expect. So come with your best.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I always say I can tell whether a candidate can sell or not within about 60 seconds of the conversation. But it's mainly due to how they communicate, how effective they communicate, how clearly they communicate. But also there's a confidence that I think you need to have to be able not to necessarily sell, but just to close, to do deals. And so I'm really looking for communication skills and I'm looking for confidence. And I think that there is a fine line, obviously, between cocky and confident. So someone mentioned it earlier, you did, James, be humble, right? I don't need to know that you won whatever you won out of the gate. I can tell whether you're confident or cocky probably naturally, but I think that there is a fine line and you have to be aware of that line and make sure you don't cross it. But also on the flip side, you don't want to seem like you don't have any confidence, because that's kind of an immediate turnoff in an interview too. It's how are you going to perform within any organization if you aren't confident in yourself and your own ability? So even if you're not a strong communicator, where are you strong? And be confident in your strengths and be able to articulate where you're strong, how you're strong, and make that clear.
Yeah, I'll echo all that. The only thing I'll add, I think, too, is having a good elevator speech. Typically when an interview opens up, they'll ask you to briefly talk about yourself. So that quick 45-second to 60-second pitch about what you bring, your past experiences, all that. Practice that as much as possible. I think that's really important too for just general networking or building relationships when you're out and doing things, or when you're at events while you're still playing or whatever. But work on that elevator pitch, because if you sound unprepared talking about yourself, it really does set the tone for, okay, how are they going to be able to execute the work we need them to do?
Can I also add just one more tiny thing? It's also the post meeting follow up. Like, you have this opportunity where you're meeting someone, send an email after, send a thank you, connect with them on LinkedIn. Like, sometime, like, don't just like leave it all in that person's court to engage. See what you can do again, especially if you like leave that conversation being like, oh man, they didn't ask me about this. And I really was hoping they'd ask me about that. Or, oh, I should have, I really want to convey my interest. I don't think I did that. Don't be afraid to like send an email or send a nice note. Some of those things for me go a long way. It kind of shows like people are going to be looking at your drive, and like players are driven. So try to bring that through the like post meeting follow up, especially if you feel like there's things that they didn't ask you, you want to clarify or something, just again to convey your interest again, or confirm those next steps or keep the conversation moving ahead. Those things too, I think are key that can help stand out as well.
I think just to add to all those great points, it's just like etiquette, little things. Of course, get there 15 minutes early. When you're exchanging emails and stuff, don't be sending emails at like 2 in the morning or whatever. Keep within business hours or in the evening time, because it just kind of just raises flag. Like, what is this guy doing up at 2 in the morning or whatever kind of deal. I don't know. There's all these random things that, you come in looking good, hair comb, whatever it is. Just these little cues, they all add up.
Can I ask one follow-up question, guys? The interview is now over. We've had it, and usually we say, listen, are there any questions you'd like to ask? Is there a question you'd like to see the candidate ask that gives you a sense of what, that they're going to have a potential to go forward?
What?
Go ahead. Someone else. Go.
Oh, I was going to just quickly, what are next steps? I'm like, okay, he knows how to close a little, or he or she knows how to close a little bit because they're trying to close, or, bring it closer to a close, so that one's always key, I find.
I would just suggest do not Google post-interview questions, because the interviewer will be able to tell that you Googled what are good post-interview questions, because I've had people tell me, I think your candidate Googled the questions to ask me. So make them relevant. I would always reference the conversation. So take notes during the conversation. So when they say, do you have any questions? You're not pulling up something that you saw on ChatGPT. You actually are going back, referencing the conversation, making it clear that you are listening to the conversation, and then asking them to elaborate on a certain point, or, hey, you mentioned this. Can you talk a little bit more about this, right? So to come in prepared with questions, absolutely, it's a must. But, I tell candidates, come in with questions. If they get organically answered through the conversation, mark them off. If they don't, and they're a real question with like a lot with meaning to it, then ask it, then you'll be able to reference something when, you're asked at the end if you have any questions. But also, yes, like take notes throughout and reference those. Like make it obvious that A, you were listening, and B, you give a dang, I mean, let's like act excited, enthusiastic, interested, curious. All of those things are so important.
Yeah. To echo Maggie, if if the role you're applying for at a requisition, typically the answers are in the rec. They tell you exactly what they're looking for, exactly what you're going to be doing in the role. So look at that, decipher it, and pull questions out of there. If they're already answered when they give you like, hey, this is the pre-run of what the role is, reminder, don't ask it again. That's definitely going to hurt you. But then go to the next question and say, okay, I noticed in the rec it said you'd be focused on this, what does that look like for you? Or how can I prepare myself now to do that? Things like that would really help you stand apart. And definitely have a question. Don't say I have no questions.
Yeah. No, that's a breaker.
I'll just add the final thing is just to make sure that you are doing your research ahead of time, but don't just go to the website. I always tell candidates, go to the social, because the social is going to show you like all the real-time things, like if they've won an award or if they've had an acquisition, and sort of showing your curiosity. I think Mo said it, like use a job description to help with your questions, but then use your research to help advocate why you're interested, what you learned, like showing that interest and curiosity and not just going to the website. Like go to the actual business plan if they have it, and reference that, like, oh, I saw this. And that's very impressive when candidates have done that and they've gone kind of that step forward where they tell me something I might not even know. I love that. So I think that will help, again, form the questions, but also will help with that pre-research you're doing.
Like for me, a couple of questions I asked in my interviews were typically, one of them was kind of putting the ball back in the interviewer's court and letting them, just kind of talk about themselves. Like I always ask, like, what did you do to get to this point you're in right now, the role you're in? So just give them opportunity to talk about themselves. I think a lot of people enjoy that, being able, tell you about their journey and their path, on how they got to where they are. And then another one I always ask was, we also got to understand, yeah, we're going to interview, but also we have to make sure that the environment, that, their job is right for me as well. So always asking them, like, what's the environment like that you foster? I mean, is this something that, resonates with me and in my and what I view? And, that was a question I would always ask, just to get an understanding if there's alignment there too. So, yeah.
Good answer.
Appreciate that, Brandon, and everybody's responses on that. I think I'm looking at my list of questions, and I know Scott's already on the same page as me, is that I think we've talked about just about everything we wanted to, but the one thing that I'll maybe use as a springboard into our Q&A directly to Brandon and anybody else that wants to ask questions in your specific experience is, and James, you already gave us one, so you can go at the end maybe because you already had to go out of the chamber on that one, but don'ts. What is the don't that we want to maybe leave our players with? Like, what is the one thing that we should maybe avoid doing in this process?
From an interview perspective?
Sorry, yes. Yeah, be specific. In an interview, what is one maybe thing that is relevant and we can build off ideally 4 or 5 of them by the end we get to our questions here?
I'll start. I would say the biggest thing is negativity. So if you are pivoting from a different career, do not trash talk your previous job or employer or sound like a disgruntled employee. Take all the positives away from that experience. Even if it wasn't one, they don't need to know that. So take all the positives away from that experience and highlight the positives. Don't talk about the negatives. Same with sports. If you listen, like typically sports don't end on your timeline exactly how you wanted them to end when you wanted them to end. Maybe your agent sucks. Maybe, like there are so many different scenarios that could have left you with sort of a bad taste in your mouth after your last job, whether it was sports or something more in the corporate world. But regardless, I just, any negativity that I sense, or just it's an instant kind of, in addition to a lot of the other things we've talked about today that are pretty much instant deal breakers, or not being prepared, or not doing your research, or all of those things, like, stay positive, keep it positive, and stay away from anything that could show any negativity in your answers, comments, questions, anything.
One thing that hurt me that I found out once I got in HR, I think that I was doing early on, and that stemmed from being an athlete, was I can do whatever you need me to do. I can do whatever, but I found that I got a negative reaction to that, which was surprising, I think, right? But I think people want you to have, and somebody made the point earlier, an idea of where you want to go or what you're focused on. Sports is very linear, right? You know what the next step and tier was, and so that's how I was trained. Whereas in business or work life, there's so many paths to the top, if that makes sense. And that really, still today, I think, struggle with that sometimes, and what is the right next step. And so I think if you can just go in with saying, hey, this is kind of what I want to do, this is the area I want to go in with confidence, I think that really does help, because it hurt me early on, I think.
Yeah, I think what everyone said is great. I think it depends on what type of conversation you're having. There's exploratory conversations where you're having like an intro chat with an employer. Sometimes it's a formal interview. Sometimes it's a phone interview with a recruiter. I would just say not to get too hung up on salary right out of the gates. Like if you have, within the first 10 minutes, if you're already asking that, it could set the stage differently for an employer. Not that we don't want to be transparent. Most job descriptions will have that. But I've had experiences where players, it's like the first thing they're asking me. And I'm like, we haven't even gotten into like anything with your background. So I get it. Like it's important, but like if that's like your main motivator and drive, we want to understand like what the type of roles are good for you, and keeping in mind you're going from playing in professional sports to a totally different industry, and everyone has to start somewhere. You may not get what you're looking for out of the gates, but what's that pathway? And so asking what that looks like what are the career paths for this role, and where would this role lead me? Because that's where the compensation comes. Like in insurance, you may start out in like more of a personal lines role while you're getting your level 2 license in commercial insurance. That's where the money is going to come, but you're going to have to start somewhere, right? So just thinking about it as like, what are you open to and what's going to lead you to that destination, and not getting so caught up on what this is going to do for you immediately, like asking all those questions. Because I think that can be sort of a negative draw to an employer. You have to be transparent about it. We would need to know, but it's sort of like our first date. So like be aware of like those first impressions, right? Like it's sort of that can sort of create a negative, and we want to get to know you still. And sometimes it's about like, hey, like we have a few different jobs and I don't know where you'll land, so I can't tell you what the salary is going to be because I don't know what position yet. Like we've got to get you introduced to other leaders, or we want to have like additional conversations, or etc. So just being mindful, because that can rub an employer the wrong way if it's just your only driver.
James, do you have any last minute? You gave us a great don't right off the last one, which is what prompted me to this question. So if you don't have one, feel free to. We will jump into the Q&A. But any last chance there?
Yeah, I think my list is long, but I think we'll cover it. But there's a lot of ways you can spoil an interview. Just know that sometimes in certain situations, like you're gonna go to a workplace and you're gonna be at that workplace, and you see them more than your family sometimes. So you just want to come off as a person that people would like to be around. So positive, etc. I think the positive spirit is a good point by Maggie.
Just trying to come off mute in time there, but I really appreciate everyone's time there. I think those are probably very easily actionable. Really, it's down to the experiential and the drive of our members. So I think however you got better at football, let's figure out how you practice. Again, back to Maggie's analogy, I love it. It's like an interview. Let's prep for that like it's a game or it's a practice, or you're trying to put your best foot forward. What kind of plays do you need to be up on in terms of reading? What kind of film should you have watched in preparation for that opportunity? I think, again, let's use everything that got you to the CFL or professional football in general, and springboard off of that into whatever you're going to enjoy next. But thank you again to everyone that joined. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. It was really, I think, something that everyone could take something away from. I know I did. I'm not looking for anything, but certainly when we talk and try to help our members along the way, I learn a lot from you all. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Shout if y'all need anything, guys.